I never thought a flat tire would change my life. There I was, standing in the parking lot of my father's auto shop, watching his face turn that familiar shade of purple as he shouted those words I'd heard 1,000 times before, "You failed. Again." The customers pretended not to hear, but we both knew they did. 28 years old and still being treated like I was 12. But that day was different. That day I walked out. My name's Mike Callahan from Greenville, South Carolina, and I grew up believing I'd never be good enough. My dad's garage was where dreams went to die. At least mine did. Callahan and Son Auto Repair. The sign promised something I could never deliver. 3 generations of mechanics, and somehow I was the defective part. What Dad didn't know that day when he humiliated me in front of everyone was that I had just discovered something that would turn our whole family inside out. A secret buried in old receipts and faded photographs that explained why nothing I ever did measured up. And when his biggest client pulled in with a flat just as I was walking away, I made a choice that would either destroy what was left of our relationship or somehow save it. Growing up in Greenville meant 2 things: church on Sundays and cars the rest of the week. My father, Richard "Big Rick" Callahan, was something of a local legend. His hands could diagnose an engine problem faster than most doctors could take your pulse. The shop had been started by my grandfather in 1952, and in our part of South Carolina, the Callahan name meant something. Mom left when I was 8. Creative differences is what Dad called it, like their marriage had been some failed TV pilot. In reality, she couldn't stand living in the shadow of the almighty garage. My older sister Ellie got out too, scholarship to UNC, now works for some tech company in Raleigh. Smart enough to escape the family legacy. That left me and Dad orbiting each other like wary planets, with the garage as our sun. Every summer from age 10, I'd be in there sweeping floors, organizing tools, learning the business. "One day, this'll all be yours, Mikey," he'd say, not asking if I wanted it. And I did want it, desperately, because wanting it meant maybe someday earning his approval. The humiliations started small. "Hold the flashlight steady, for Christ's sake," or "That's not how I showed you." But they grew as I did. When I was 16, Dad had me change the timing belt on Mrs. Patterson's Camry while a group of his buddies watched. My hands shook so bad I dropped the tensioner pulley twice. "Like trying to teach a fish to climb a tree," Dad had said, and his friends laughed. I wanted to disappear into the concrete floor. High school graduation brought the grand gesture. Dad's surprise gift of a complete set of Snap-on tools, professional grade, arranged in a massive red toolbox with my name engraved on a brass plate. Must have cost him $5,000. Everyone at the graduation party oohed and ahed, said how lucky I was. All I could think was, now I have no excuse to fail. College wasn't an option. Not for a Callahan man with a business waiting. Besides, I wasn't book smart, like Ellie. That's what Dad told everyone, though I'd maintained a 3.8 GP despite working at the garage 20 hours a week. I once found an acceptance letter from Clemson's engineering program in the trash. Dad had opened my mail. When confronted, he just said, "Waste of time and money. Everything you need to learn is right here." The irony is I loved cars. Still do. Just not the way he did. For Dad, they were mechanical puzzles with clear solutions. For me, they were stories, each ding and scrape a chapter, each modification a plot twist. I started customizing old beaters on the side, giving them new life with creative paint jobs and interiors. Dad called it arts and crafts, not real mechanic work. What I found last month changed everything. I was cleaning out the storage room above the garage. Dad never goes up there since his knee replacement, when I found a shoebox of old paperwork. Buried between tax forms and ancient invoices was a stack of letters. Letters from MIT. A full scholarship offer. Designs for engine modifications that looked like they'd been drawn by Dad's hand. Patents that were never filed. A whole secret life my father had abandoned to take over the family business when his father got sick. So where are you all watching from today? Drop a comment below. I'm always curious to hear which part of the country, or world, this story is reaching. Sometimes knowing we're connected makes sharing easier. The annual South Carolina Auto Restoration Club barbecue was the highlight of Dad's social calendar. Picture 30 gearheads in their 50s and 60s, standing around vintage muscle cars, trading stories that grew taller with each beer. This year it was at Lake Hartwell, and as usual, I was Dad's +1. Dad had been working on his pride and joy for this event, a '67 Shelby GT 500 he'd rescued from a barn in Oconee County. 3 years of restoration, thousands of hours, parts sourced from all over the country. The car was immaculate, night mist blue with white racing stripes, period correct everything. It was objectively beautiful, even to someone who didn't know cars. This is our statement piece, Dad kept saying in the weeks leading up. Gonna put Callahan and Son back on the map. Business had been slow since the new chain auto center opened at the mall. We needed the publicity and, more importantly, the connections. Half the club members were potential clients with deep pockets. I'd been tasked with detailing the interior while Dad handled the engine. The morning of the barbecue, I was finishing up the dashboard when I noticed a hairline crack in the original wood veneer. Barely visible, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I made the fateful decision to try fixing it myself with a specialty resin I'd been experimenting with on my own projects. We arrived at Lake Hartwell around noon. The parking area looked like a museum exhibit, Corvettes, Camaros, a couple of Thunderbirds, even a DeLorean. Dad positioned the Shelby front and center, already rehearsing the restoration story he'd tell anyone who'd listen. Remember, he said, straightening his Callahan and Son cap. These people aren't just car enthusiasts, they're potential customers. Don't get weird on me. By weird, he meant talking about my ideas for modernizing classic interiors with sustainable materials, or the custom shop I dreamed of opening someday. I was supposed to nod, smile, and defer to his expertise. For a while, things went according to plan. Dad held court around the Shelby, explaining each restoration choice in painstaking detail. I played my part, handing him beers, laughing at the right moments during his stories. But then Bernie Makowitz, president of the club and owner of 3 car dealerships in the county, peered closely at the dashboard. "Rick, what's this?" Bernie pointed directly at the spot I'd repaired. Under the bright sunlight, the resin had a slightly different sheen than the original wood. Not bad, just different. Dad leaned in, squinted, then turned to me with that look. The one that said I'd let him down again. "What did you do to my dash?" His voice was quiet, which was worse than yelling. "I found a crack this morning. I fixed it with a specialty resin. It's actually more durable than, you should have told me." Dad's voice rose. "I would have handled it properly." "There wasn't time," I said, feeling my face grow hot. "The resin needs 8 hours to cure properly, and we were already running late." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Dad ran his finger over the repair. "This isn't period correct. This is some homebrew solution." "It's not homebrew," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's a conservation-grade epoxy used in museums. I've been researching restoration techniques that's your problem, Mikey." Dad cut me off. "Always thinking you know better. Always trying to reinvent the wheel instead of just doing things the right way, my way." The crowd grew uncomfortable. Some drifted away. Bernie tried to diffuse things. "Looks fine to me, Rick. You can barely notice it." But Dad was on a roll now. This car was going to be our masterpiece. Our calling card. And you just had to put your mark on it, didn't you? That's when I said it, the thing I'd been holding back for years. "Like you put your mark on those MIT designs?" His face went blank. "What did you say?" "I found the letters, Dad. The scholarship. The patents you never filed. You wanted to be an engineer, not a mechanic. You had dreams beyond the shop." The color drained from his face. Bernie and the others suddenly found their beer cups fascinating. "You had no right going through my things," Dad said, his voice a dangerous whisper. "They were in the shop storage, our shop," I replied. "The one you never asked if I wanted to inherit. The one you sacrificed your own dreams for." The sky darkened suddenly, a summer storm rolling in from the mountains. Perfect timing. People began covering their cars, packing up coolers. "You want to have this conversation here? Now." Dad gestured to the retreating crowd. 25 years I've been coming to this event. 25 years building relationships you just torpedoed. Thunder rumbled in the distance as fat raindrops began to fall. Dad turned to Bernie and the few remaining observers, his professional smile back in place. "Sorry folks, family drama. You know how it is. Let's get these cars covered before the storm hits." As everyone scrambled, Dad leaned close to me and said the words that would change everything. "You failed. Just like always." That's when I walked away, heading to my truck as the rain began pouring down. I didn't know then that fate would place me at the exit just as Charles Reynolds, owner of Reynolds Construction and Dad's biggest commercial client, pulled in with a flat tire, right as the storm unleashed its fury. If you're enjoying this story, please hit subscribe and help us reach that 1,000 subscriber mark. Your support means everything, and I promise the confrontation that follows is worth sticking around for. The rain was coming down in sheets when I spotted Charles Reynolds in his Mercedes G-Wagon, hazards blinking, pulled to the side of the gravel exit road. Even through the downpour, I recognized him immediately, tall, silver-haired, always in expensive work boots no matter the occasion. Reynolds Construction had a fleet of 20 vehicles that Dad serviced exclusively. Their account kept us afloat during lean months. I could have driven past. Part of me wanted to. Instead, I pulled over. "Mr. Reynolds," I called out, jogging through the rain. "Need some help?" He looked relieved to see me. "Thank goodness. Got a flat and this damn spare mechanism is different from my last G-Wagon." I nodded, already assessing the situation. "I can take care of it. Pop the back and I'll grab what we need." As I worked in the mud and rain, Reynolds stood under a golf umbrella, watching. "Your dad around? Thought I might catch him here." "Back at the barbecue," I said, loosening the lug nuts. "Showing off his Shelby." "That car's been his obsession for years," Reynolds chuckled. "Keeps promising to let me drive it when it's done." I said nothing, focusing on the task at hand. The rain plastered my shirt to my skin, but my hands worked with confidence. This, at least, I knew how to do. "You're good at this," Reynolds observed. "Quick, efficient. Different style than your dad, though. He makes a ceremony out of everything." "We have different approaches," I said, jacking up the vehicle. "I've noticed. You know, your estimate for updating our fleet's electrical systems was impressive. Much more forward-thinking than what Rick proposed." I looked up, surprised. "You saw my estimate?" "Dad told me he presented a different plan." "He showed me both. Said yours was too experimental, too costly up front. I liked your ideas about future-proofing, though." The flat tire came off in my hands. "He never told me that." Reynolds shrugged. "Rick's old school. Likes things the way they've always been." As I secured the spare, something crystallized in my mind. All these years, Dad hadn't just been dismissing my ideas, he'd been taking them, filtering them, claiming the good ones when it suited him. By the time we finished, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Reynolds handed me his business card. "Call me directly next week. I want to hear more about those electrical upgrades." I stared at the card, then looked back toward the barbecue area. A decision formed. "Actually, Mr. Reynolds, if you have a minute, there's something I'd like to discuss now." We walked back to the barbecue area, finding most people sheltered under the large pavilion. Dad was mid-story, the center of attention again, the Shelby safely under its cover nearby. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me with Reynolds. "Charles," Dad called out, all smiles. "Didn't know you were coming. Wasn't planning to, but got a flat on the way to a site visit. Lucky your son was there to help." Dad's smile tightened. Mike's always been good with the basics. Something in me snapped. 28 years of good with the basics, while my ideas were either dismissed or stolen. 28 years of living in the shadow of a man who had abandoned his own dreams and seemed determined that I should do the same. "Mr. Reynolds," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I'd like you to look at something." I walked to the Shelby and pulled back its cover. Dad stepped forward. "Mike, what are you doing?" "The car's not ready for, I want to show Mr. Reynolds my repair," I continued, pointing to the dashboard. "The one you said ruined the car." The small crowd, sensing drama, gathered around. Dad's face darkened. "This is not the time or place," he warned. It never is, I replied, then turned to Reynolds and the group. Did you know my father got a full scholarship to MIT? That he designed engine modifications that could have revolutionized fuel efficiency back in the 90s. A murmur ran through the crowd. Dad stood frozen. Did you know he hides every innovative idea I have, even when clients prefer them? I continued, my voice steady. That he'd rather this business die clinging to the past than evolve into something new? That's enough. Dad shouted, his face that familiar purple again. No, it's not, I said. Not anymore. For years, I've tried to be the son you wanted, the copy of yourself that would validate your choice to give up your dreams. But I'm not you, Dad. And I'm done pretending to be. I turned to Reynolds. The electrical upgrade plan you liked? Dad told me you rejected it. He's been doing that for years, taking credit for my successes, highlighting my failures, making sure I never outgrow the shop or his shadow. Dad stepped toward me, his voice dangerously low. You ungrateful? I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. For what? The opportunity to become as bitter and regretful as you? To watch my own dreams die while preserving some family legacy no one asked for? The pavilion had gone completely silent. Bernie Makowitz looked at his shoes. Reynolds watched with undisguised interest. I found your MIT letters, Dad, I said, quieter now. I know you wanted to be an engineer, not just a mechanic. That grandpa got sick, and you gave it all up. That was your choice. A noble one, even. But forcing me to live your backup life? That's not noble. That's just sad. Dad's face had lost all color. For the first time in my life, he looked his age, tired, defeated. You don't understand, he began. I understand perfectly, I cut him off. And I quit. I tossed him the keys to the shop. Then, in front of everyone, I walked to my truck without looking back. No one called after me. No one tried to stop me. As I drove away, rain starting to fall again, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Dad stood alone by the Shelby, staring after me, suddenly looking very small. 3 days passed. My phone stayed silent except for texts from Ellie asking what happened. Apparently, Dad wasn't talking. I crashed on my buddy Jason's couch, trying to figure out my next move. 28 years old, and everything I knew was cars and a business I'd just publicly quit. On day 4, Charles Reynolds called. That was quite a show, he said without preamble. Not my finest moment, I admitted. No, it was exactly your finest moment, Reynolds countered. First time I've seen you stand up to Rick in all the years I've known you both. He invited me to his office that afternoon. When I arrived, he laid out a proposition. Reynolds Construction was expanding their fleet maintenance division. They needed someone to head it up, someone who understood both traditional mechanics and innovative solutions. We've got 30 vehicles now, looking to double that next year, he explained. I need someone who can maintain them, but also think ahead. Electric conversions, hybrid options, reduced environmental impact. Your father's excellent at what he does, but he's fighting the future instead of preparing for it. The salary he offered was twice what I made at Callahan and Son. I'd have my own garage space, a staff of 2 to start, and creative control. Why me? I asked. After that public meltdown. Reynolds leaned back in his chair. Because that meltdown showed me you care enough to risk everything. And because I've watched you work for years when I've brought vehicles in. You don't just fix problems, you prevent them. I accepted on the spot. That evening, I drove to see Ellie in Raleigh, needing perspective from the only other person who truly understood our father. You should have seen his face, Elle, I said as we sat on her balcony. Like I'd physically struck him. She sipped her wine thoughtfully. Maybe you did. His ego, anyway. I didn't want it to happen like that. How else would it happen? Dad doesn't exactly invite heart-to-hearts. Ellie revealed something I never knew. Dad had tried to talk her out of going to UNC. Said college was a waste for someone who'd just get married anyway. Mom had intervened, their last major fight before the divorce. He's terrified of change, she said. Always has been. When I visit the shop, nothing's different from when we were kids. Same tools, same layout, Same faded Pennzoil calendar from 2005. Did you know about MIT? I asked. She nodded. Mom told me years ago. She said it was the great disappointment of his life, the road not taken. He channeled all that frustration into the shop, into making you his second chance. I'm not his second chance, I said. I never was. A week later, I got my first surprise. Bernie Makowitz came by Reynolds Construction to see my new setup. He brought photos of the Shelby's dashboard. Your dad refinished it, he explained. Stripped it down completely, redid the whole thing. But here's the kicker, he used your resin technique for the final coat. Asked me all about it first, where you might have learned it. I stared at the photos. The dashboard looked perfect, better than original. He'll never admit it, Bernie continued, but he was impressed with your work. Just too stubborn to say it. The second surprise came 2 weeks later. A package arrived at my apartment, the brass nameplate from my toolbox, now mounted on a walnut plaque. No note, just the engraving, Michael Callahan, engineer. Dad must have gone through my designs, seen the work I'd been doing on the side. It was as close to an acknowledgement as he could manage. The third surprise was finding Ellie waiting at my apartment one evening, her expression serious. Dad's selling the shop, she announced. My stomach dropped. Because of me? Because it's time, she corrected. He's 63 with a bad knee and arthritis. Should have done it years ago. She handed me a folder, listing agreement, financial records, inventory. He wants you to handle the sale. Says you'll get a better price than he would. Why me? Why not a broker? Because it's his way of saying he trusts your judgment. Also, he's terrible with paperwork and you know it. That weekend, I went to the shop for the first time since the barbecue. Dad was working alone, head bent over a valve adjustment on a Dodge Ram. He glanced up when I entered, nodded once, then returned to his work. I set the folder on the bench. Ellie gave me this. Figured she would, he said, not looking up. Why are you selling? His hands paused briefly. Because some smartass kid told me I was living in the past. I waited for more. Dad straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. I got a call yesterday, he said. From MIT. Alumni department. They're doing this program for people who got accepted but never attended. Online courses, some campus visits. Engineering certification. My mouth fell open. You're going back to school? Just a few courses, he muttered. See what all the fuss was about. We stood in awkward silence until he pointed to a tarp in the corner. Should show you something before you go pricing things. Under the tarp was my first car, a 92 Honda Civic I'd bought for $800 at 16. I'd sold it years ago when it finally died. Found it at a junkyard in Spartanburg, Dad explained. Been restoring it. Well, modifying it really. The Civic had been transformed. Solar panels integrated into the roof. Custom interior using sustainable materials, exactly what I'd been experimenting with. And under the hood, a hybrid conversion that looked suspiciously like one of the designs I'd sketched last year. You did all this? Dad shook his head. Just the mechanical bits. Had to get help with the solar integration. Turns out your ideas weren't so crazy after all. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from him. Thought maybe you could display it at that new garage of yours, he continued. Show people what's possible with older vehicles. Sustainability and all that crap you're always talking about. I ran my hand along the car's roof. This is incredible work, Dad. He shrugged, but I could see the pride in his eyes. The unexpected twist came a month later. As I was finalizing the shop sale, I discovered something in the accounting records, regular payments to a consulting, going back 20 years. When I asked Dad about it, he became evasive. Just business expenses. Nothing important. But the amounts were substantial. I dug deeper and found C. Stood for Catherine Mills, my mother's maiden name. Dad had been paying her all these years, disguising it as consulting fees. When confronted, he finally admitted the truth. Mom hadn't just left. She'd wanted to start her own interior design business. Dad had secretly funded it through the shop accounts, made it look like legitimate business expenses. She had dreams too, he said simply. Figured one of us should get to follow them. I called Mom that night for the first time in years. She confirmed everything, adding that she tried to get Dad to tell me, especially once my own design interests became clear. He was afraid you'd think less of him, she explained, that you'd see him as a failure for giving up his dreams, then compensating through you. 2 months later, the shop sold to a national chain for more than we expected. Dad used his share to enroll in that MIT program and buy a small condo in Cambridge for the on-campus sessions. I invested mine in expanding the Reynolds Fleet division, adding an apprenticeship program for high school students interested in sustainable automotive technology. The Shelby went to Bernie Makowitz's private collection, with one condition: Dad and I would maintain it together, twice a year, no matter where we were living. As for the Civic, it sits in my new shop's front window, a bridge between the old ways and the new. Between father and son. Between what was and what could be. It's been 18 months since that rainy day at Lake Hartwell. Dad graduated from his MIT program last month, at 65, the oldest in his cohort. He's consulting now for a firm developing retrofitting kits that convert classic cars to electric, splitting his time between Boston and Greenville. We talk weekly, not always easily, but honestly. The Reynolds Automotive Division now services 60 vehicles and has contracts with 3 other construction companies. We've hired 4 mechanics and 2 apprentices from the local technical college. Last quarter, we completed our first full electric conversion of a construction pickup, a project Dad and I designed together over video calls and weekend visits. Mom's interior design business has expanded to 3 states. She specializes in sustainable materials for commercial spaces, something she and I collaborate on for our automotive interiors. Turns out creativity runs in both sides of the family. Ellie jokes that it took a public meltdown and family business implosion for us all to finally find our places. She's not wrong. Sometimes systems need to break completely before they can be rebuilt properly. That flat tire changed everything, not because of what happened, but because it gave me the courage to stop running from confrontation. To stand in my truth, even when it hurt. To understand that my father's expectations weren't chains unless I accepted them as such. I still have that brass nameplate Dad sent me. It sits on my desk at the new shop. Next to it is a framed photo from Dad's MIT graduation. The 3 of us standing together, smiling genuine smiles. And beside that, a small piece of the Shelby's original dashboard that Dad saved for me. Imperfections visible, but beautiful in its authenticity. I've learned that family legacies don't have to be burdens. They can be foundations upon which we build our own structures. The materials might be passed down, but the blueprint is ours to create. If there's someone in your life trying to force you into a mold that doesn't fit, whether it's a parent, partner, or friend, remember this: their limitations aren't yours. Their fears don't have to become your boundaries. And it's never too late to change the story you're living. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. We've built this channel around stories of family dynamics and breaking through expectations, and your support helps us continue creating content that reminds us all that our paths are our own to choose. This is Mike Callahan from Greenville, or maybe Boston this week, helping Dad with his latest project, signing off. Remember, sometimes fixing what's broken means having the courage to walk away first. And sometimes, the most important repair job is the one we do on ourselves.